Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show's reaction to Week 17. It is the final broadcast that we are doing of 2024. We've made it, guys. We've made it this far. And boy, what a weekend of football we have to look back on as well, with some surprises at both ends of the table, I guess, for myself, Brian O'Leary, Kieran Boyle, and Noel Downing to hop into. We would like to remind everybody, first of all, that this show is brought to you by QuimBet. And Noel, I'll go to you first as the NFC North aficionado in the group, because we were looking at a QuimBet at the start of the year, and I called it out. In fairness, guys, remember me and Brian did a video before the start of the season. We said who'll be the surprise package this year, and I said the Vikings have a good chance to really prove some people wrong. I didn't think they'd be as good as they are, and now it is confirmed that game 272 of the season, the final regular season matchup, will be between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football this week coming, because the Vikings yesterday played such a strong game, came out pretty dominant in the early passages and managed to get the win over the Green Bay Packers, but again ended up being a one-score win. And a bit like the Chiefs, the Vikings are a team that are getting a lot of one-score wins right now. We know, as we're recording here, we don't know the result of the Lions 49ers matchup on Monday Night Football, but regardless of what happens there, we know that on Sunday the winner is going to be the number 1 seed. The loser between Detroit and Minnesota is going to be the number 5 seed. And Noel, I'll put it to you that the Vikings, maybe more so than Detroit, are coming into this probably on a greater run of form, because they've managed to time their run even better. And maybe, just maybe, they are the ones that actually will be the more dangerous outfit of that NFC North pairing by the time the playoffs come around in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, absolutely, Shane. I mean, the NFL couldn't have wrote this script better for the end of the season, for the NFC North, and for these two teams to finish the way they have. But the Vikings looked phenomenal the other night. I know the Packers came on late and got a few scores and kind of made it interesting. But again, you never really felt like the Vikings were going to give that up. They were so dominant. Sam Darnold, I mean, all the questions, I'm sure at this stage, have to be gone. Again, what another great game he had out there. But this is a team now who are in great form. They've so many weapons offensively to cause team problems. This Brian Flores defense causes teams lots and lots of problems, and they're a lot healthier than a Detroit Lions team, who we've talked about already, who are decimated at times on defense, who have still done phenomenally well to keep going the way they have done with those injuries. And for this Saturday, it kind of feels like a toss of a coin now, and to which team could really go and win this game, because they're both really good teams. And, the Lions, I expected to be there. The Vikings, I thought they'd have a good season. I thought they'd be fourth in the NFC North, how that prediction has come back. But just look at them. This shows you what you can do when you have a competent head coach who knows how to work with quarterbacks, which is very important, especially, for the issues they had with Sam Darnold coming in, explosive players on offense and on defense. And yeah, I mean, they're just being so impressive this year going into this game. It's going to be one of the top games of the season, and it's just going to be fun to watch. But whichever way it goes, there'll be a good team who will win. But yeah, I'm just so impressed with this Vikings team. And you mentioned it. They have been the kings of one-score games. You can call that lucky after 2 or 3, but after a while, you're just a good team that knows how to win. And that's what this Vikings team have done. And for a lot of the season, they just went quietly under the radar, because the Lions took all that kind of plaudits and praise, and everyone was looking at the Lions. And this Vikings team just kept marching week in, week out, doing what it needed to do. And here they are now. It's in their own hands to really establish themselves going into these playoffs. And as an NFC North fan, I do enjoy watching these teams, and this weekend is going to be a great game to watch.
Kieran, maybe you might kill my recency bias, because I was certainly, when I was listening to podcasts in the car this morning, when I was, I guess, reminiscing and trying to put my thoughts together as to what I expect from this NFC North matchup on Sunday and what I really expect from the Vikings, I just felt really good about the Vikings. And look, we talk so much about the Chiefs and their ability to win one-score games, and because it's the Chiefs, and because they've been there, done that, we know that we can expect that they will show that ability to compete going into the playoffs. We look now to Kevin O'Connell's Vikings and how strongly they performed, particularly in the first half yesterday against the Packers in what was a really key game. The Vikings are 9-1 in one-score games this season. They've won 26 as Kevin O'Connell took over as head coach in 2022. Again, they're a team that know how to win these close situations. But considering the battles they have against Detroit firstly on Sunday, and then whatever they come against in the NFC side of the playoffs, going forward, which you know it would be a tough battle. I just wonder how you feel based not only on your reading of yesterday's game against the Packers, but just in general. Can the setup the Vikings have between Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores and Sam Darnold and all the players and talent they have, how serious can we actually take this outfit as a Super Bowl contender? Because so much talk has been put on the Eagles and the Lions on the NFC side of things, and I just wonder how much credit or how much fear we should be having for what the Vikings are able to do.
Well, yeah, we talked so much in the year about how much we loved watching Detroit, and the stuff that they did both between the head coach and the rest of the team, and like you said, the Vikings kind of slipped under the radar and quietly went about the business. I wouldn't say there's too many parallels between the team from 2 years ago that with Kirk Cousins that went to the playoffs and lost, but again, ability to eke out wins. Packers weren't really about it yesterday, and we'll probably talk about them in a little bit. But absolutely, they're coming into form at the right time. And Detroit they're definitely scared right now. They're definitely on notice about this Vikings team. And when you look at the two teams right now, the main thing you can kind of look at is the health of the defense. Detroit's defense has been banged up for weeks now, and you saw what Minnesota did yesterday. Love he never settled. He could never get into a rhythm. And, I've been talking about these guys all year, Van Ginkel, Harrison Smith, Stephon Gilmore, guys like that who are just, all-stars, perennial Pro Bowlers. And this Vikings team is even more for real than the team from 2 years ago who kind of crept along and kind of eked out wins that they probably shouldn't have got. But this Vikings team is getting hot at the right time. Sam Darnold, I mean, this is a guy a couple of years ago was sitting on the bench seeing ghosts with the Jets, and now look at him. I mean, I don't think he'll win the MVP, but he's definitely in the conversation. So it's at this time of the year, it's momentum. It's who's getting hot, who stays healthy, who's got the hot hand. And right now, you got to say Minnesota is definitely one of those guys.
Brian, I know we had a chance to talk about it last night, but in terms of the overall picture of Minnesota, how are you feeling about them?
Look, I was obviously, look, you couldn't not be impressed with the performance last week, and Kieran's alluded to it. The Packers were off for large parts of the game. I'd say they were off because the Brian Flores masterclass came through again defensively, caused turnovers on the opening drive, which was a little bit of a game changer. And we touched on it last night. It was Jefferson didn't get involved until the second half, so spreading the ball around offensively. Sam Darnold coming through with some huge plays. But in a roundabout way, I think this will kind of work into the Lions' favor because it's all about the Vikings right now. And I know we're kind of a game away from a full wrap-up of Week 17 with the Lions playing later on this evening. I don't think we take too much out of that game either way because of the 49ers situation. And this week is going to be so much about the Vikings. It already has been. Today, if you look at predominantly most of the social stuff, it's all about the Vikings. I wonder will Dan Campbell be using this to his advantage to say to the guys, hang on a second, guys, we're the team in the NFC North that's been making the waves over the course of the season. Yeah, the Vikings in their own right have had a great season, but everybody's been talking about us for a large part of the season going to the Super Bowl. And because of our injuries, this team still put up 40-odd points on the Bills a couple of weeks ago, put a number down on the Bears last week, and they're going to go in tonight. And I've suggested they'll win this game tonight comfortably because of the nature of the injuries in which the 49ers don't have. But yeah, I just think the way we could play out, everybody will be high in the Vikings, and I wonder will this fall into the Lions' laps. I mean, I don't think we can get away from how big this game is. Like, to win this game and be one seed and have everything run through your own building, as opposed to being the fifth seed, go on the road. It's such a huge. It's monumental in terms of what the season, who's going to be playing in the Super Bowl representing the NFC.
Kieran, I might throw back to you to, I guess, quickly touch on the Packers. Interesting situation. They're sitting at 11-5. They're going to go in as probably the best of the wild card slots by the time the playoffs come around. But the problem with them is you look at the 5 teams they've lost against. They've lost 2 now against the Vikings, 2 against the Lions, and once against the Eagles. That game was in Brazil. There's all the usual caveats around that. But when we're trying to figure out how tough and how serious they are going into the playoffs, and look, we know that they control games. We know what their defense is capable of. We know what Jordan Love and co are capable of doing when they keep control of the ball. But I don't know, considering that the fact that that their record is 0-5 against the 3 teams in the NFC who have better records than them, I just don't know how much further these Packers team have to grow. Whether they're just going to do a similar situation to last year, find a way to get a nice victory on week 1, and then that's it, fade away into the sunset.
Yeah, and I think they just I think they're at 7 now. after yesterday. And like you said, 0-5 against top 3 teams in the NFC. That's not a great statistic to have going into the playoffs. There's a different feel from last year where they kind of they surprised a lot of people. Now people are expecting them to do something in the playoffs. Kind of like with Stroud and Houston, there's something missing with the Packers. They haven't been consistent in those big games, especially like you said when they've gone up against the top teams in the NFC. There's something missing. There's something off. They beat up on the smaller teams, obviously, but I'm skeptical on the Packers going into the playoffs. Last week I was a little higher, but after yesterday, Love got hassled and harried real quick, and he never got into a rhythm. Yes, it was the Vikings defense, but if you keep him on his toes, you keep him scrambling, similar to a Caleb Williams situation. The errant throws start happening. It's gonna depend on how he uses these wide receivers of his, Dobbs and Reed and players like that. But the 7th seed, that's a really tough spot to be in the playoffs. And I'd be anxious if I was a Packers fan because, as we talked about the Vikings getting hot at the right time, Packers is getting wobbly, similar to how Houston was getting wobbly in October, November. I don't really know how to read them right now. But that can all change next week. They could have a blowout performance next week and go in hot. But as of right now, I don't really know how to take this Packers team. I really don't.
Yeah, nor do I. And I just think the fact that fair enough, they've been able to beat the team they're supposed to beat, and you look at the performance that they put up against New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. But I don't know. Just when you're looking for them to pull out a really strong performance in a game where they need to prove themselves to be one of the better teams in the league, they're just not quite there enough. And Brian, I know we were talking last night that you're not quite sure as well as on Jordan Love and a few other aspects of this Packers team. So when it comes to the playoff picture now, and my apologies, you're right, they are in the 7th seed going into this. How is your general feeling about how far the Packers can go?
Well, as for Jordan Love, I think Noel actually, in fairness, called it out very early on in the season. It's been quite consistent. Like Jordan Love had a great kind of second half of the last season, and he played well in the playoffs, but got that contract very quickly, and that just hypes up the pressure on a guy. He's on a big contract. There's the expectation from Packers fans and across the league and fans that he's going to have a huge season. And I'm not entirely sure we've seen that consistently over the course of this season. Yeah, there's been some bright spots, but by and large, he hasn't played even at the level in which he played towards the back end of last season. In terms of the playoffs, I think it's huge for them that they go into LA and play against the Rams. So they need to win this weekend and take care of business. I mean, the Commanders are going to go into Dallas, and like, with all due respect to the Cowboys right now in terms of how poor they played yesterday, like, this is a different beast. This game, for some reason, just brings out the best in the Cowboys. We saw them go into Washington and turn them over. So there is a scenario where they can get back into that 6th seed. The Rams, everyone's kind of saying, oh, great, the Rams have won the NFC West. But if you look at the Rams over the course of the last month, they've started into this divisional win. They didn't score a touchdown in Santa Clara on the Thursday night game. They struggled against the Jets last weekend. They only scored 1 touchdown, 4 field goals. They didn't do much on Saturday night, which was quite a poor game, and they got over the line just about in the end against the Cardinals team had nothing to play for. So you could say they're of all the NFC teams, they're going into the playoffs with the least amount of kind of production in terms of offensively how they're playing. I think the Packers might land on a good spot if they can go into SoFi. They won earlier on in the season. It doesn't necessarily mean the result is going to be the same again, but better go in there than go into Philadelphia as a 2nd seed, because I don't think they're coming out of Philadelphia with a victory.
No, we'll move the conversation from the NFC North to the NFC South. The interesting results yesterday. The advantage there is firmly back in the Buccaneers' hands. The Buccaneers got a big victory over the Panthers, whereas the Falcons came up short to the Washington Commanders. The Commanders, of course, sealing their spot in the playoffs. We'll talk about them in a minute. But I guess, firstly, your initial reaction to the performance by the Falcons on Sunday Night Football last night. It seems I was kind of thinking of you a little bit when I saw this morning that Raheem Morris had left another timeout on the board. I was like, God, it's Thanksgiving and the Bears all over again. But no, I didn't. But what really struck me more than anything else was, I guess, the fact that Bijan Robinson managed to get a bit of room in the first half, but Dan Quinn completely shut him down in the second half. And Michael Penix Jr. I don't think was exceptional enough for sort of at the level which you expect of a playoff chasing team to be able to make up for it. Sure enough, he attempted 35 passes, only completed 19 of them, 223 yards, a TD and interception. It's just, it definitely seemed like there was a performance of a team that was maybe on not quite on its last legs, but doing its best to get over the line. But considering how strong and assured the Buccaneers were a couple of hours beforehand. It just wasn't it for the Falcons.
Yeah, it was a tough night for the Falcons. It kind of feels like the Falcons season. They fly out, they take the lead, they're doing well, but then for whatever reason, second half they just kind of slow down, and they're a team you just find it incredibly difficult to trust. You then show a rookie quarterback who has just come in, who's starting his second game, in this kind of atmosphere with everything that's on the line against a team like the Commanders, who have the wind at their backs with everything going for them with that offense and the positivity that team has. It was a tough ask for the Falcons in the first place. Then you mentioned, first half, Bijan Robinson goes off, he gets all those yards. Second half, it just doesn't happen for them, and it kind of turns into a tough slog for them, and then it's an overtime defeat. And I'm watching the sideline to see if Eberflus has snuck on there with the way that things are being handled with time management. But yeah, I think none of us are surprised at this. We've all kind of felt that the Bucs have had that win behind them in this division the last few weeks. They're putting up points left, right, and centre. Baker Mayfield is having a phenomenal season. And yeah, I think the Falcons have just left it too late now. I think they'll both teams will probably win going into the last game of the season, but that's no good for this Falcons team who had it in their hands earlier on. And as I say, just they're not the kind of team you can really rely on. And they've let it slip. And I think the Bucs now obviously are in a fantastic position. I think they've looked so good, especially on offense, that you can't see any worries for them in week 18. And I think the Falcons have missed out now. They've pushed it close, but the way they were at one stage during the season, they should have taken it, but they couldn't do it. And you get what you give in, and this is the way it's ended for them.
Of course, not all is over yet for the Falcons or for the Buccaneers, Kieran. I know you were watching the game in Jacksonville yesterday, but over on the Gulf Coast side of Florida, the Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers offense had an absolutely fantastic game. Baker throwing 5 touchdowns, looking really confident. And, consistency is key in the NFL. We haven't always seen it from the Buccaneers, but by God, when they click, they click. And considering where we're sitting now, we always talk about how much records show. And I know you saw a good bit of the Falcons game last night as well. Do you think that it's a fair reflection of how the NFC South has gone so far? That the Buccaneers are on top there and are kind of in the driving seat? Do you think they've definitely earned that spot over what the Falcons have been able to put up so far this year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Buccaneers are the class of that division. And it's, they obviously when Evans and Godwin went down, they stuttered a little bit and they lost a couple in a row. Well, I think it was 4 in a row, but just consistency. Atlanta last night, Penix. I mean, we can talk for a while about, Terry Fontenot and draft night 2024 and all that kind of stuff. But I still feel they threw Penix in too early. I still think Cousins had stuff in the tank. I think it was a panic move. There's going to be ramifications about that in the postseason, in the off season. But for me, Tampa has been, they've been the class of the division. Even players like Bucky Irving coming up, it's another 300 or another 100-yard game for him. And when you got Mike Evans and even rookies like Jalen McMillan, coming up. I mean, it's just everything's coming up for Tampa. Baker's been great. I mean, I've been saying that for weeks now. I really like how he plays, just that gung-ho attitude, that Brett Favre kind of gunslinger attitude. He's going to throw a bunch of picks, but he's also going to make some great throws and put some big scores. 551 yards of total offense yesterday. That's the difference right there. They're able to put up a huge amount of points. Atlanta's been stumbling and stuttering for weeks, maybe even months. That nice start they had where they mixed up the offense is now. I mean, Bijan Robinson should have been enough to win the game for them yesterday, but they just, they left 3 timeouts in the first half. They didn't even touch the timeouts in the first half. And then Morris made a huge mistake in that final drive. So, I mean, I think there should be a bigger issue of that made. I know it was, but it should be even bigger than it has been. Because that was the difference in the game. The Falcons could have won that game. I mean, the first half, they were great. They were all over Washington. And it was a game of 2 halves. Washington just put the foot down and was able to come on through. But for me, I like Tampa. Similar to how last year ended. How they were in the playoffs. They're getting good at a good time. Again, Mike Evans healthy is a huge factor. He's back on the field, and that defense. When you got that defense for Tampa running around, Vita Vea and those guys, they're in a good spot. So I would definitely favor them over Atlanta. The Jets of the NFC, as I've called them.
That's certainly an interesting tag, and I don't know how much to take to that, but I'll certainly be laughing at that one later. I guess we move on to the team that did win that Sunday night football clash, Brian, and the Commanders, who have sealed their ticket into the playoffs. You were kind of laughing at the fact that the hoodie I'm wearing today is in the same colors, which is a complete accident, by the way. What I find interesting, though, when I look back at this, is the fact that Jaden Daniels this year has thrown a touchdown in the last 30 seconds, a touchdown pass in the last 30 seconds in 5 games this season, which is an NFL record. And it just shows to me, I think, the kind of second half team mentality that the Commanders have built up. We saw it against the Eagles last week. We definitely saw it in action against the Falcons last night. I mean, at halftime, the Falcons went up 17-7 up. The Commanders came back to go 24-17 up. Now, of course, it ended up going to overtime at the end, but they have that bounce back ability. They have that resilience. They have the talent. They have the. I don't know whether the fact that Jaden Daniels there and a couple of the other pieces of offensive talent, and even just the Dan Quinn way, means that they just have that kind of. I don't want to say youthful arrogance, but just the idea that they're never really beaten until you actually kill them off. They always have a belief that they have a way to come back, and I think that makes them a particularly dangerous side to play against. I don't think they're going into this with the same level of pressure that, say, the NFC North teams are coming into. They're not coming into this with an expectation to do well. So when you look at their ability to come back, we saw it against the Eagles. We saw it earlier this season against the Bears. There's a lot of other close games that even ones that didn't go their way, which they've certainly been in the fight. They're a tough fighting team. And I just wonder, especially when you're looking at Jaden Daniels and other aspects of the offense are playing, how much do teams in the NFC really want to face these guys by the time the playoffs kick off?
I'd say most teams would want to face them. I think they're playing with house money now, to be honest, Shane. I thought they were very fortunate to get out of that game, which has been already called out by the lack of coaching ability, maybe by Raheem Morris. But another turning point in the game, which we haven't focused on, was it was 17-7 in the opening drive of the second half. The Falcons made a huge stop on third down. They already had them behind the sticks on a long third down, and they give up a needless flag, which gives the Commanders a force down, and the Commanders go and drive down. It was a big momentum swing. They've got away with, I wouldn't say they got away with so many games this season by winning 1 scores, because that's the nature of teams. We spoke with the Vikings 2 years ago and how efficient they were of getting over the line. But the Vikings lost in the wildcard game very quickly in that playoff run. It was like as if, they've done well to get where they are, and now ultimately when they come to play the big boys, they'll get beaten. They're going to have that feeling about the Commanders. I think they'll go on the road. Will they go on the road? They will go on the road. Yeah, they're going to be a wildcard team. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So they go on the road. I just think it'll be too big a task. Look, they've had a great season, but I think you're going to see upper echelon head coaches go against each other now. I'm just not sure Dan Quinn is at that level. I know he's coached in the Super Bowl, but he's had a great season. But I think the Commanders are a team very much that look like whoever gets them in the playoffs will be happy to have them come into their house, and I think they'll be disposed of quickly.
Yeah, the only thing I'm worried about from their point of view, I guess, is the fact that in each of the last 3 games, their leading rusher has been Jaden Daniels, and you have to wonder how much of a run game or how much of the load can they share to other players by the time they get into those more tough physical football games. But I think I wouldn't be so down. I definitely wouldn't sort of take them easy. I definitely want to. If I was coaching against them, they're sitting at the 6th seed right now, so they'd be facing against whoever's in 3rd. Am I right in saying that? So, like, I'd be coaching hard and trying to kill these guys early on.
Their run game hasn't been the same since Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson was having a fantastic season, backed up with Nicholas and Gonzalez, and then he got injured, and it hasn't been the same since. Even Brian Robinson just seems to have lost a step, though, what we saw over the course of the season. I know it's a long season, and Kieran's rightly called out. I know he's not a rookie, but there's a kind of a wall in which players hit during the season. He was out for a couple of games with an injury. He hasn't looked the same since. Their run game hasn't looked the same since, which is why they're heavily reliant on Jaden Daniels to be pulling out these magical run plays. But ultimately, I think it'll come to an end during the playoffs. But Commanders we didn't have Commanders doing anything this season. We thought they'd win a few games. We spoke about how they brought in some veterans who would understand the nature of what Dan Quinn was trying to build, and Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. But it's all come together very well, and Jaden Daniels has made a huge impact in the season, very much like CJ Stroud last year, 2nd pick. Probably the expectation of him was a little bit less compared to Caleb Williams. But look, they're in the playoffs. It's a fantastic year. I'd imagine he should be rookie of the year, but I just think it's too big a task for him to go on the road in the playoffs and win.
Yeah, it's amazing what having a competent head coach can do for you. Right, that's it for section 1. We spoke a lot about the NFC side of things. We will focus on the AFC side of things after this. Welcome back to the Irish NFL Show's recap of Week 17 action, and Kieran we'll cast our memories right back to the sort of distant past of Saturday night as the Denver Broncos and Cincinnati Bengals faced off, and what was a key matchup for both teams in their race for the final wildcard spot in the AFC side of the draw. A lot of teams are hoping for the Broncos to lose, including, of course, the Bengals. It went to overtime, and the Broncos managed to find a way to let this one slip as T. Higgins caught that touchdown and brought it over the line for the Bengals in overtime. This is a very dramatic game in the end. We had that doink in overtime from the Bengals. But I guess the point I want to make, or certainly the thing I'm looking at, is that this is the second week in a row that the Broncos have had the chance to seal their playoff fate. And the second time now that they've lost by one score. When they played against the Chargers on Thursday Night Football before Christmas, they were going into the fourth quarter with a lead and ended up shipping a couple of scores to the Chargers and didn't do much in the fourth quarter. Similar against the Bengals. Look, playing against the Bengals in Cincinnati is always going to be tough. We know how good that Joe Burrow offense can be. But he was given a lot of room to work with. T. Higgins was given a lot of room to work with. Chase Brown was given a decent amount of room to work with as well. And that Broncos defense that we're expecting so much from, what they were certainly riding a lot in the earlier side of the season, there's 2 games in a row now where they really need to get things done, and they haven't got it done. And now that they go and face against the Chiefs this coming Sunday, I don't want to use the word bottlers or throw it around too early, but certainly I think there are a lot of Broncos fans feeling a little bit nervous going into this weekend.
Yeah, and as they should. I mean, that game was there for them. I mean, that first of all, what a great game. I mean, that took away the memory of the Christmas Day games. I had to console myself with a boatload of bowl games just to get my football fix after all that. So to watch that game was just that was just what everybody needed. Back and forth, offensive. I mean, Joe Burrow. I mean, what can you say? I mean, is he the MVP? Is he going to be one of the candidates? Sacked 7 times by this Broncos defense. But from a neutral's perspective, everybody wanted to see to go to overtime just to see what else we would get. It had everything. It had phenomenal catches from Marvin Mims. It had T. Higgins making incredible catches, offensive plays all over the place, exactly what everybody wanted to see, not what the Broncos wanted to see. And Sean Payton had to take that in the press conference afterwards. Some questionable decisions, especially in overtime. Over-reliance on throwing the ball when they could have run it to get some first downs. A lot of incompletions towards the end of the game, especially in overtime. And that's what's going to – if it all in the wash, if it comes out in the wash that they lose to the Kansas City – that's what's going to be pointed at. I mean, that was a very, we've seen, I mean, weekly you see strange coaching decisions, but some of the decisions from Peyton on that drive that had an overtime, leaves you wondering what's going on. Incompletions, strange passes, strange play calls. But on the flip side, to see the Bengals hype like that, it's almost like they did make the playoffs. They were so relieved, and who wouldn't want to see Burrow in the playoffs the way they've been, the last couple of weeks. You have to feel sorry for Cade York. The fact that they were able to come back, it was a big deal for him because nobody wants to see a season ended like that. But it's a first win for the Bengals against a team with a winning record. Can't lose sight of that. So it's a win that they needed. It's great for the league, great for the storylines, but for the Broncos, it's going to be a tough game next week, even if the Chiefs rest a lot of guys. But I would be very, very, very skeptical about Peyton going forward if they end up missing out in the playoffs.
It's an interesting one that on Monday coming, the the two AFC North clashes will be, sorry, not Monday, on Saturday coming, the two AFC North clashes will be what we'll see. And at 1 o'clock Irish time, it will be Steelers Bengals. That, of course, has a lot to play for from both the Steelers and the Bengals point of view. So, you know, we want to see Joe Burrow sort of keep the pressure on and make things interesting going into Sunday, I guess, from an entertainment standpoint. I know it's not just the Bengals. I think if we actually look at the sort of the hierarchy of teams looking to grab that spot, I think it is the Dolphins who are just ahead on that. But we talk so much about Joe Burrow being potentially an MVP candidate, yet they're just trying to scrape a way in. And you know, I'm sure on Thursday's program we'll go into what's happening between the Chiefs and the Broncos, because by then we'll have a clear picture as to what the Chiefs are going to do and how many starters are going to play. And I trust that they're probably not going to play a lot of their starters, particularly on defense, which I'm sure Bo Nix and co will be very happy about. But when you look at this Bengals team, you know, certainly the offense and Joe Burrow are deserving of a playoff spot. The defense has managed to find ways to not cut themselves to glory over the course of the season. But, you know, when they've needed to get things done, you look at their recent results. They got a 7-point win over the Cowboys. They beat the Titans by 10. They took care of the Browns pretty easily, and they took care of the Broncos in overtime in a game that they absolutely had to win. That was a playoff game for them, really. Problem is, though, they have to play against the Steelers, and the last time they lost the game was against the Steelers on the 1st of December when they shipped 44 points. Now, I don't know if you expect 44 points to be scored by the Steelers this time out, but certainly when you're looking at the Bengals, and there'll be a lot of Bengals, not Bengals fans, Bengals people who are sympathetic to their cause looking at this, how do you rate their chances?
When you have this offense, you have Joe Burrow, as you mentioned, playing at quite literally is an MVP level. Most of their seasons, when you have 4,640 plus yards and 42 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, there's no conversation on MVP. But he's just run up against this. You know, the Bengals haven't got the results, and then the other two guys who we'll talk about later, you know, who have been obviously racking up the stats themselves. I mean, this Bengals offense has been pretty much faultless for the majority of the season. As you mentioned, it's a defense that's really let them down badly at times, and it's a really slow start to the season that, you know, every week we kind of felt, okay, it'll kick in now, and it didn't for a long time, and that's where they've really killed themselves. The only, I guess, plus point is, you mentioned the Steelers game when they shipped 44 points. Since then, it feels like they've been a little more manageable on defense. You know, against the Cowboys, they give up 20. Okay, 27 against the Titans isn't great, but then 6 against the Browns and 24 against the Broncos, which aren't all perfect, but they're a lot better than this defense had been playing up to that, which was really getting this team in trouble. So look, the Bengals are a good team. There was a lot of high hopes coming into the season. Nobody saw the defense doing what it was doing. If that defense can be manageable or average this weekend, this offense can, I think, humble a Steelers team, which, you know, the Steelers have kind of gone in the opposite direction over the last few weeks. They feel like they're, you know, their form really is kind of suffering in that kind of final run in. You know, are they starting to, I don't want to say bottle, because that's not right. They've good players. But are they starting to kind of feel the pressure? Now, they've lost to good teams, you know, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs. There's no shame to losing against those teams. But still, when you're in a run of form, which is loss after loss after loss, that can eat away the team. Where on the flip side, the Bengals are winning at the moment. I think that could give them a bit of an advantage going into this game. And it's going to be a massive divisional game for the Bengals. And I think the offense can step up. I'm worried about the Steelers at the moment. I don't feel too strongly about them as I did a few weeks ago. And I think this Bengals team are really scrapping now for the fight of their lives to get into this playoffs. As you mentioned, there's other results. The Dolphins are ahead of them, and, you know, there'll be a few permutations that'll need to go their way. But from their point of view, they just need to go out and beat the Steelers. And I actually think they can this weekend. I just think the Steelers are going the wrong way. The Bengals feel like they're kind of going the right way. And I think they need it. And I think they'll do it.
Right. This is the section of the program where I guess there's two things that are less in our talking points list. Whatever happened in MetLife yesterday and in the MVP conversation. So we'll get into the miracle in the Meadowlands, as for the first time this year, a New York team won on a Sunday in New York. This time it was the Giants, as they scored over 40 points against the Indianapolis Colts. There's a lot of fallout on this game in both New York and Indianapolis. And Kieran, I'll come to you later on. I know you were kind of keeping an eye on what Pat McAfee was saying, but I'll come to you first, Brian.
What else is to be said? Shame.
But I was talking to Craig Rigdon about this, who is the person, anybody who doesn't know, he would have remembered him from when I was in Wembley. He's the person who does all of our graphics. He's also a Giants fan based in the UK. And I said to him, I was like, this seems like Dayball playing for this job. And there's even question marks as to whether Joe Shane is out, but Brian Daboll is in, or whether he'll stay in, or what's going on here. Because there is offensive plays there that the Giants haven't even attempted in weeks. And if Dayball's not playing for his head coach, he's at least trying to play for offensive coordinator. That's the only way I can read that performance, because it wasn't like a team who, with a lot of players trying to get over the line, managed to get a 10-3 victory. This is 40+ points that they put up on the Colts here. It was unbelievable turn of events.
Well, I'd look at it the other way. I'll use appropriate words. I think Brian Daboll is very much aware that he will no longer be the Giants head coach, and I think it's inevitable that it'll be confirmed next Monday, on Black Monday, or even earlier on in the day. Sometimes you see it's called late Black Sunday. You know, by the time you wake up here, Irish time, there's already 3 or 4 firings, and I think Brian Daboll knows inevitably he will lose his job, and I think he will grow frustrated, because over the course of the last 2 weeks, the Giants have been putting out all these kind of storylines, and it's all leaking out from the organization around. Everyone is working on the assumption these are a pairing. I don't care. Will probably still challenge this and see it very different, but they have done everything in their power to make sure that everybody realizes these two are not joined at the hip. Whilst it might look like that, that's not the way the ownership wants to do it. The ownership does not want to blow it up in terms of sacking the GM, because your locals, your scouts are gone, your national scouts are gone, your assistant GM is gone, and I just don't think John Mara and the organization have the wherewithal to go about having to restructure the whole thing all over again. So they will keep him, and I think Brian Daboll's probably looking at this kind of going, you've given me very little to work with over the course of the last 3 years. You've re-signed the quarterback on the basis of a couple of games and a good season and a big playoff win. In fairness, he played very well in that playoff game. He got the contract. Brian Daboll was very clear. It was very evident by his persona in the Hard Knock series that he wasn't sold on Daniel Jones, and he didn't really want to work with Daniel Jones this season. And yesterday for me was he was going to go all out to put an offensive performance in on a defense under Gus Bradley that has been flaky all season, and it was pretty very flaky yesterday. So, you know, Malik Neighbors, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns. They couldn't stop him. The yards after catch yesterday was unbelievable. And Daboll's probably thinking, yeah, I do need to secure another position somewhere else, and I will be back in the league as an offensive coordinator somewhere else in the league. And I think teams will be jumping all over to get him in. But I think yesterday that was a bit of a 2 fingers up to GM and the ownership around why he's had to work with the season from a manager's perspective, because he's ultimately the one who's going to be relieved of his duties come next Monday. That's my view on it. Kieran might say it a little bit different.
Yeah, Kieran, there's after this game, there's a lot of stuff up in the air. You know, Shane Steichen, what's going to happen with him? The Colts defense, what's happening there? The Giants and everything that's happening there. Try to make sense of it for us, please. I know you were in Jacksonville when that game was going on, but come on, that's this. I can't make sense of a lot of what happened in that game yesterday.
I mean, it was a disastrous game for both sets of fans, for both teams. You know, I was sitting in the stands watching the game, and they were, you know, I was there with my son and a couple of his friends, and he's a Giants fan, and the scores were coming up, and he kept telling me, the Giants are up, and he's getting all hype, and I didn't have the heart to tell him at the time that it's not great, but I mean, oh God, where do I start? I'll start with the Colts, and then I'll go to the Giants. The Colts, for a team that had playoff aspirations and playoff chances yesterday, the way they laid down and took it yesterday is. That has to be it for Steichen. It's got to be it for Bradley, because that was a pathetic performance from all around on the team. And you can trace some of it back. And, you know, Pat McAfee put out a thing on Twitter or X last night, just absolutely flaming the organization. And I'll jump on some of the points that he brought up about, just being accountable, about professionalism. You know, you think back to the Colts, their season. It started with Taylor sitting out looking for that contract. They appeased him, Steichen babied him, and they gave him everything he wanted. And then you had the Anthony Richards situation where he asked for a break out of the game. Now McAfee and others have flamed the organization for that. Now you add that between Steichen's coaching style and just the way that the organization babied Taylor at the start. And then you have Gus Bradley's defense, which got, not just yesterday, but they've been bad for a long, long time. It just got amplified yesterday where they got blown out by a Giants team That defense got blown out by a Giants team who has had struggled to move the ball all year. And now you get people talking about Drew Lock is coming back next year. He's the quarterback that the Giants need to build around. I agree with Brian. I think Dable's gone. I think the writing's been on the wall since Munich. And if Joe Shane doesn't go, I will be absolutely beside myself, because I think he is the architect of this disastrousness. Every single week we see Saquon, and if Saquon gets on the field, which is debatable right now next week, regardless, what Saquon has done for a divisional rival is eating away at Mara like it is every single Giants fan. Saquon was going to leave. That's fine. But, the fact that he went to the Eagles, that's the problem. But Shane has got to go too. I can't abide a situation where Shane stays and Dable goes. They've both got to go. Mara's got to clean house. It's got to be top to bottom. I don't care what scouts have to go. The entire organization's got to be restructured. If you work in the corporate world, people come in and they examine what's going on in your company. They see the weaknesses. They see what needs to be restructured. They see where's the fat we need to trim. That's what the Giants need. They need somebody with a clear set of eyes to go in and rip it apart, take it from top to bottom. Because since 2014, and probably since 2014, this organization has been a disaster. This is a franchise going back. I mean, it's the anniversary of the Colts game in 1958, which lives long in the lore of NFL history. This is one of the premium, along with the Bears, it's one of the premium franchises that's become a laughingstock. And it's done it under Mara's watch. And for the fact that he's let these things happen for so long is a damning indictment of him as an owner. And if he lets Shane stay as the GM, it's going to be a huge, huge problem for me personally, but also for a lot of Giants fans, because I can't see a situation where they move on in a real way. Now, I'm not sold. Again, I'm not bent out of shape with these draft picks. The Giants are at 4 now. I mean, if they could potentially, if they really wanted to get Sanders or Ward, do a little trade with the Patriots, and they might move up by next week. But I wouldn't be getting bent out of shape by not getting the 1 or 2 spot. There's a lot more that has to be done with this Giants team, top to bottom, organization, everywhere on the team. So, Shane has to go. That's the only way I can see it. And this organization has got to be restructured. I don't want another coordinator coming in. It's got to be, taking the time, figuring this thing out, and letting Mara just maybe tell him, listen, take a step back. We got to figure things out with a different set of eyes. But I'm going to let Brian have the final word on before I go on too long.
Shane, this kind of signifies where Noel was at in November. If Shane stays, so that's where me and Kieran are not aligned, because I just have a feeling Shane is going to stay. If Shane is already desperate, he's desperate to get a quarterback. He's going to be even more desperate now, no matter who comes in as the head coach, because he's going to say, I've got 1 year essentially to try to turn this around, or I'm definitely gone. So he's going to panic mode to get a quarterback. That would, for me, would entail him potentially moving up, and it's not against the realms of possibility, but he might have to give the year to wait to get back up, get up to 1, and the Patriots get a boatload of picks, and they can reconvene in terms of what they want to rebuild. He's going to then put that quarterback into a head coach that may not even want to work with that quarterback. A season isn't a success, he's gone. The next GM comes in and goes, you're not my head coach, I don't want you, you're going to be gone inevitably. And the whole cycle and the whole circus starts again and again. And it's back to what Noel said about Eberflus and Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles should have got rid of Eberflus last summer, because the Bears are probably a year ahead of where I can see the Giants being in terms of this revolving door of people coming in and out of the organization.
Welcome to the world of the Bears, Brian.
But I'm right now, isn't it? This, like this is what we've been discussing. It's
the cycle. It's gone for the Bears year after year. It's the cycle that's happened, and you can see the Giants slipping into it when you suddenly get GMs who are kind of out of sync with their head coaches or with the incoming quarterback, as you say. If they make a desperate move for a quarterback to come in, but they're on the hot seat, suddenly then you've brought in that quarterback, they lose their job 12 months later, and then everything is back in flux again, and round it goes. And that's been Chicago for the last number of years now. Sometimes teams, as Kieran says, they just need to trim the fat. They just need to make the big decisions early, cut it all, and just get everything aligned from your GM to your head coach to your new quarterback. Try and get them all on the same clock and then work from there. But teams don't. They chop and change, and suddenly everything is uneven because nobody is aligned with anybody else, and one is gone and the others are staying, and so on. And it's teams that that are run badly who find themselves in this cycle, and they just need to make the big decisions to get out of it. And so far, the Bears, the Giants find themselves there.
Yeah, but thanks for the number 1 pick, by the way. Much appreciated. Great that we have that. I can't believe we're sitting
You
here.
probably will end up trading the back of them for the world.
This is great how gas it is.
Can I make another point? Sorry, Shane, one more point. Interesting enough, if you look at the lines, I checked the QuinnBet lines for next weekend, and they're already talking about it's not a foregone conclusion. The teams who are sitting, Kieran's obviously has made his point. It doesn't really matter right now, because if you get a new GM and a new head coach, you know what, you'd probably be a bit more confident about what the plan is, even if they are picking a 4. The Patriots are only 1.5 point underdogs next weekend because the Bills are going to rest up. The Titans are 3.5 point favorites against the Texans. And the Browns are 70.5 point underdogs against the Ravens. I think we'll put that game to bed on Saturday. The two are interesting because it isn't against the realms of possibility that the Patriots find a way to beat the Bills. And I'm not trying to navigate and find ways of victories that push the Giants up. But
you're manifesting it. Don't take our number one.
Where the lines are for these games, that people are so unsure as to what's going to happen. The Texans team are resting up. The Texans team have been struggling for weeks. The Titans beat them already in Houston, so it's not against the realms of possibilities they go and beat them next weekend. Will Levis is going to play, interesting enough. He's going to give them one final shot, which I think is bananas. But then maybe here I might want to come in on that.
Oh, brilliant. Will Levis, yes.
I don't know how Tennessee were god awful yesterday. I don't know how, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't throw the ball, run the ball, do anything. So I don't know how the Titans are. I don't know how they're favorites. That's crazy.
Oh, Will Levis is back. Is that right? I didn't hear that.
Oh, yeah, he said he's going to play both of them. I don't know how he's going to manage that, but that's his plan. Yeah, give Will Levis another opportunity. I think that's probably the ownership putting the pressure on.
That's going to cheer me up now after whatever happens, because I'm sure whatever happens at on 6 o'clock on Sunday probably won't make me happy. Right, that's enough with the bad team talk. Let's talk about the good players. Let's talk about where we're sitting in the MVP race, because this is the week 17 that's gone as the last week of the real war. Because week 18, as you know, is a bit of a phony war for some of these teams. We're talking about the fact that Josh Allen, a lot of the Bills mightn't, a lot of starting Bills mightn't play. The Ravens still have something to play for, so Lamar Jackson will probably get to see a good bit of him on Saturday evening Irish time. I bring this up because my colleague at Indo Sport, Ronan Mullen, who people might know, who's been on this podcast a couple of times, is a big Ravens fan. We're sitting across the desk to each other arguing as to who is the MVP right now. He is obviously making the case that it is Lamar Jackson. And he sends me all these bunch of stats to prove to me why it's Lamar Jackson. And I think it's Josh Allen, personally. I think he's the most valuable player to his team, which is currently sitting at second seed and playing some of the best football they have played. But at the same time, you look at some of the yards. Lamar Jackson is beating Josh Allen at the moment in passing yards, yards per attempt, the TD-INT ratio, rushing yards, and passer rating. The only difference is team record and the fact that astoundingly, Josh Allen has 4 times as many rushing TDs as Lamar Jackson. But maybe I'm narrowing down the MVP race too much to those two guys. There's other people in the race there as well. So we'll give everyone their minute to explain kind of where their feelings are on the MVP race at the moment. We'll go with you, Kieran, first.
It's got to be Josh Allen. What he's done this season. You take Diggs out of there, and what has he got? We all questioned his wide receiver room, but he's been great. What can you say? He's cut down on his interceptions. He's brought players into the game that he's resurgence with Amari Cooper's career. Made a really good player out of Keon Coleman. It's got to be Allen what he's done. No player epitomizes a city in the NFL, in my opinion, like Josh Allen with Buffalo. You can't think about Buffalo without Allen. It's been him. The only way I can see it not being him is if Saquon does something ungodly next week and manages to play, which I doubt he will. But if he does, and Eric Dickerson's there, and there's a big fanfare and a big parade and all that kind of stuff, that's the only thing that might sway it. But it has to be Allen just on his body of work and what he's done. People forget about the Diggs thing. It's easy to forget because the NFL is such it changes from week to week. But what he's done with the wide receiver room, and he's even made Mac Hollins, an absolute cast off in the league. He's made him a serviceable wide receiver in the league. So, that's just one of the things he's done. It's got to be Josh Allen.
I'm glad you bring up the point about him clearing up or getting better on throwing interceptions, because I remember last season there was a few games where Josh Allen, I think, was very sloppy with the ball in typical Megatron be down there somewhere type plays, as Colin Cronin would put it. There's a couple he threw against Miami. There was a 3 he threw on that famous night in the Netherlands when Aaron Rodgers got injured after 4 plays. Like, there was a lot of incidents there where he looked, had a lot of potential but very sloppy. And the fact he's fixed that this year, I think, has been a huge, huge difference to how the Bills and Josh Allen in particular has been playing this year. I for me, that's where my pick is for. So we'll go for the rest of the Associated Press. No, what way are you landing on the MVP race at the moment?
Yeah, I'm with yourself and Kieran. Look, Lamar Jackson has been phenomenal. Joe Burrow has been phenomenal. If you go by stats, maybe you say they win it. But, I said it myself last week, and you said it there tonight, Shane. For me, of these players, Josh Allen is the most valuable player to his team. We came into the season and we questioned a lot of the moves the Bills had made. We wondered, were they even going to win the division this year? Could they put a playoff run together, because they made so many changes. Kira mentioned Diggs go, and there was other moves as well. It just kind of, we wondered what kind of Buffalo Bills we were going to get. Josh Allen came in, and you look at the receiving core he had, you look at the running backs, good players. Don't get me wrong, they are good players, but I think Josh Allen makes them better players than they would have been without him. Whereas you look at the weapons that Lamar Jackson has in Baltimore with Derrick Henry, obviously is a top class running back, and I even think Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews are on paper, especially at the start of the season, would have been looked at as better receiving options than what Josh Allen has. But Josh Allen has come in, he's absolutely dominated, on the ground, through the air. It doesn't matter. He's dragged that team along with him. They have 13 wins. They have, they've gone way above my expectations of them, because I was genuinely wondering what kind of team we were going to see. But you see Josh Allen in this kind of form. I think of all the teams where we have these, contenders for MVP, I think the Bills would be the one that would be a much more different team where Josh Allen not under center. So for me, I think it's not just stats based. It's the eye test. It's what you see this guy doing week in and week out for his team. And I think for me, Josh Allen has just taken this team on his shoulders and really run with it. And they are now a Super Bowl contender for me because of Josh Allen.
Brian, we'll pass the final word on to you. Are we narrowing down this argument too much between Allen and Lamar? Who else could potentially go in there? If we look at, by the way, the QuinnBet odds, Josh Allen's at 3-10.
3-10. Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
It's 3 to, am I reading that right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's odds on. He's odds on.
Lamar is 9-4, and then Saquon is 16-1. That's kind of where things are going there. But are we narrowing down too much? Are we passing over Lamar, I guess, because he's already won it, and maybe there is a desire for something new, and because I think that the Tony Romos of this world talk so much about how great Josh Allen is, are we ignoring something in Baltimore? And it's interesting as well, because when it comes to week 18, Lamar will have his time in the sun. He'll be there playing in a standalone game on Saturday, one that means something, as opposed to Josh Allen, who may not even play among the myriad of 6 o'clock games or 1 o'clock games American time on Sunday. So this race isn't over yet, but how are you looking at it so far?
Well, he's not going to play this weekend because his team have had a better season than the Ravens, because they've got the 2 seed and they're locked up and they don't need to even put their players on the field. I will side with Lamar, because this team probably should have went to the Super Bowl last year and they came up short in the championship game. It was a masterclass by Spagnuolo, and the pressure of the Ravens to come back this season even stronger, and Lamar's had a stellar season. I think the signing of Derrick Henry has been key. Like, when he was signed, they kind of went, okay, he's had his struggles the last couple of years. Will he be able to play at the level in which we saw a couple of years ago? But he has, and I think that's really kind of complimented Lamar. We saw that even in particular on Christmas Day, whilst the Texans weren't up to much, it allowed him to do what he does well, which is that kind of run pass option. And you touched on it on Saturday morning. He only threw the ball for 15 times in that game, but he did everything that he has. The attributes that he has as a quarterback are fantastic. And can we not just give it to whoever wins the game? Because ultimately these two are going to play each other in the playoffs. But it looks of it, judging by the seedings, it looks like if the Ravens are to win, they'll go into Buffalo. And why not just give it to whoever wins that game? But no, look, that has the makings of a fantastic game. I'll side with Lamar. I'm not doing it to be different. I just think Jackson has had a point to prove again this season, to come back off a difficult loss in the championship game and get his head right and come back and make sure the Ravens are in a position to go for it again come January. So for me, it should be Lamar, but I think ultimately it will be Josh Allen.
Ryan could be giving the NFL ideas there now. Every year they could have an MVP bowl, and just, put two teams together who have a player each who could be an MVP. Get a bit of hype in that.
Is that not just what the Pro Bowl is, really? Yeah, the Pro Bowl is just that, except without the players going to the Super Bowl, no?
Well, the voting's end. When does the vote end? It ends at the end of the season, doesn't it? Because that's the thing. Like, you can get these huge playoff games, and you wonder if the impact of such a stellar performance in the playoffs would sway the judges and the voters if it was to be extended beyond the regular season. But I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, no, certainly interesting. And of course, the performance of both of those men and a lot of other things in January will be key to a lot of what's going on. But that is it for our recap of Week 17. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us over the course of 2024 from start to finish. We will see and hear everybody in the new year. Thank you very much for listening to the Irish NFL Show.